Hi, I'm Savannah Zippel,
And I'm Anna Johnson.
and today we're presenting on speech and language impairments.
But first, let's take a look at the daily life of a speech language pathologist. Christina, a speech language pathologist, works in a school. She works with children and adults who have impairments with their speech, voice, or language skills. These impairments can take many forms, as her busy schedule today shows.
First comes Robbie. He's a cutie pie in the first grade and has recently been diagnosed with childhood apraxia of speech, or CAS. CAS is a speech disorder marked by choppy speech. Robbie also talks in a monotone, making odd pauses as he tries to form words. Sometimes you can see him struggle. It's not that the muscles of his tongue, lips, and jaws are weak. The difficulty lies in the brain and how it communicates to the muscles involved in producing speech. The muscles need to move in precise ways for speech to be intelligible. And that's what she said. Well, that's what she and Robbie are working on.
Next, Christina goes down the hall and meets with Pearl in her third grade classroom. While the other students are reading in small groups, she works with Pearl one-on-one using the same storybook. Pearl has a speech disorder too, but hers is called dysarthria. It causes Pearl's speech to be slurred, very soft, breathy, and slow. Here, the cause is weak muscles of the tongue, lips, palate, and jaw. So that's what Christina and Pearl work on, strengthening the muscles used to form sounds, words, and sentences, and improving Pearl's articulation.
One more student to see, fourth grader Mario, who has a stutter. She's helping Mario learn to slow down his speech and control his breathing as he talks. Christina already sees improvement in his fluency.
Tomorrow, Christina will go to a different school and meet with different students with speech and language impairments. But for today, her day is Robbie, Pearl, and Mario. Thanks for joining us in the daily life of a speech pathologist. Defining speech and language impairments. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2004 defines this as a communication disorder, such as stuttering, impaired articulation, language impairment, or vocal impairment that adversely affects the child's educational performance. The key to this is that it adversely affects the child's educational performance.
The American Speech and Language Hearing Association defines it as an impairment in the ability to receive, send, process, and comprehend concepts of verbal, nonverbal, and graphic symbol systems.
Now for some fast facts about speech and language impairments. 19% of children receiving a special education service in the school are receiving speech and language impairment services. 1 in 10 people in the United States have a speech and language disorder. And boys are more likely than girls to have a speech and language impairment.
So, what is language? Language is a method of human communication, either spoken or written, consisting of the use of words in a structured and conventional way. It represents ideas and concepts about the world, and it's usually a rule-based method of communication.
So let's look a little deeper into language. Language has 5 components. The first component of language is phonology. Phonology is the sounds characteristic of a language, the rules governing the language, the sequencing of sounds, and the tone used for certain sounds, which may also include the pitch. An application of this in your classroom could be the articulation of speech sounds. So phonology mainly focuses on sounds.
Such as la, pa, sha. Morphology is the second one. It's rules governing how the words are formed from the basic elements of meaning. The application is the use of grammar and words. Usually the words are broken down into Latin words, but it depends on where the word originated from.
Our third category is syntax. Syntax refers to rules for how to string words together to form phrases and sentences. It is also the relationship among elements of a sentence. A classroom application is the use of grammar in phrases or sentences. Here we have an example of syntax. In this example, you can see that we start with this sentence. The boy and the girl ate their tea, which seems kind of strange, but it's a functioning sentence. From this, we use syntax to break it down into a noun phrase and a verb phrase. Further from there, we can break down the noun phrase farther into conjunctions, nouns, and other pieces of grammar to help develop the syntax of a sentence.
The fourth component of language is semantics. Semantics is the meaning of words and sentences. For application, it's how we use word meanings and word relationships. For example, if I told Anna, Anna, I hate you, Anna would feel sad. It conveys meaning.
The fifth and final component of language is pragmatics. Pragmatics are the social effectiveness of language in achieving desired functions. Rules related to the use of language in social context is another definition. An application of this in the classroom is the use of language to affect others. For example, you could have some cute little cartoons like we have here that you could pass around with your students. Your dad bought a new shirt, but you don't like it. What should you do? This could be group work or individual work. Your friend is wearing a hat that you think is ugly. What should you do? This could also be displayed by a demonstration. A student you don't recognize walks into the room and looks lost. What should you do? These are all real-world applications of the 5 parts of language in the classroom.
So let's talk a little bit about language disorders. What is a language disorder? It is the delay or difficulty with mastery in one or more of the 5 aspects of language that we just talked about. It's categorized as either expressive or receptive disorders, and usually it's more debilitating than speech disorders.
Let's take a look at some examples of language disorders. The first example is expressive disorders. These are commonly incorrect grammar, limited use of vocabulary, repetition of information, hesitation, and a student does not provide enough information to the listener. The other type is receptive disorders. This is where the student does not respond to questions appropriately, can't follow oral directions, cannot recall sequences, and has difficulty comprehending figurative language. Expressive disorders are basically those when the child has this difficulty expressing their feelings, so speaking itself. Where receptive disorders is, for instance, if Savannah is speaking to me, I can't understand it and I don't comprehend what she is telling me.
There are 2 main things that cause language disorders. We have 2 categories, such as organic and functional. Organic happens to be the physical cause. It can be something such as a cleft palate, a dental malformation, prenatal factors, or even a brain injury. The functional category is without any obvious physical basis. This can be something like emotional disturbance, depression, or anxiety.
Now that we've learned about language disorders, let's take a look at speech. Speech is the expression of language with sounds. It is also the ability to express thoughts and feelings by articulate sounds, so sounds using your voice.
Just like there are ways to classify language disorders, there are also ways to classify speech disorders. Our first speech disorder is articulation disorders. It's one of the most common disorders, but it's usually commonly cured by age 8. It is the error in the production of speech sounds, and it can include omissions, distortions, substitutions, and additions. Most students go to therapy for this. I actually had an articulation disorder when I was younger and went to therapy up until 2nd grade.
An example of an omission is when a student omits sounds, such as using the word Italy for Italy, so they omit the A in the word.
A distortion is similar to what it sounds. It's distorting the sound, such as schlip for sip.
A substitution is using a different sound and substituting one for the wrong sound, such as wed for red or wabbit for rabbit.
An addition is usually adding another word or another letter or another sound to the word, such as dog for dog.
Now for a little articulation disorder humor. In our article here, we have the R, Yar, Har, pirate dilemma. The pirate linguistics have long debated the R, Yar, Har question. And in this one, we have you say tomato and I say you're wrong. Let's all call the whole thing off.
There are several causes of articulation disorders. The first one is developmental disorders such as autism. You can also have genetic syndromes such as Down syndrome, hearing loss, illness, or neurological disorders such as cerebral palsy.
Now let's work on classifying some speech disorders. First, we will go through voice disorders. Voice disorders relate to the quality of the voice itself. It's not especially common in children, but there are two types, phonation and resonance.
The first type is phonation, and that is related to the production of sounds. It's a deviation related to voice quality. Examples of this can be hoarseness, pitch, monotone, or loudness.
Some students, especially those with hearing disabilities, are often louder than they need to be simply because they think since they can't hear something, being louder will help them. The second category is resonance. Resonance is the direction of sound. It's characterized by hypernasality and hyponasality. Hypernasality is when there are too many sounds going through the nasal passages at once, and hypo is when there are too few sounds going through.
Just like language disorders, we also have causes for voice disorders. These include organic causes, functional causes, and psychogenic causes. Organic causes can be structural or neurological. Functional causes could be phonal trauma, muscle tension, or vocal fatigue. And psychogenic causes can include anxiety, depression, and stress.
Another classification of speech disorders are fluency disorders. These occur with problems with the rate, flow, and rhythm of speech. They often include hesitation, repetition, and avoidance of words. Stuttering is the most common fluency disorder seen in children, and it is also more common in boys than girls.
Fluency disorders are mostly caused by genetic factors and neurophysiological factors. Genetic factors can include mutation of genes, and neurophysiological factors can be the deficiency of the gray matter in the brain, reduced neural connectivity, and atypical brain development.
So now after we've learned all of these different things, let's go back to the beginning with Christina and her speech-language pathologist position. What are some of the ways Robbie, Mario, and Pearl can have support in their classroom? Take a minute to think about the options that you have just learned using the tools that we have just taught you. So once you've thought about these for a moment, let's look at the language disorders and how we have some implications for teachers. First, you can help children to learn proper production of speech sounds, focus on interactive communication, and use active listening in the classroom.
You can also incorporate the student's interest in the speech, reinforce communication attempts when the student is nonverbal, and paraphrase back what the student has said or indicated.
By using linguistic scaffolding techniques that involve a series of questions, you can benefit students with language disorders. Working at the student's pace and presenting one concept at a time are also very beneficial. The use of tactile and visual cues can help many students as well.
We learned what to do for language disorders, but what do we do for speech disorders? Some of the implications for teachers with speech disorders is to be able to speak directly to the student, consult a speech-language therapist for assignments and activities, and encourage participation in discussion.
When appropriate, it is often very useful to use a peer buddy system to help out the disabled student. Devising alternative procedures for activities with the student, using gestures to support understanding, so doing some hand signaling, and being patient when the student is speaking is extremely critical for these students.
So now let's talk about some general classroom implications for both language and hearing. Reduce classroom noise, ask the student to repeat instructions, and allow extra time to complete work.
By providing visual cues, allowing students to record lectures perhaps, providing social and tangible reinforcers, and establishing routines are all beneficial for your general classroom atmosphere. It is our hope through this presentation that you have learned many new topics on speech and language impairments. Thank you. These are our references listed, and they're also on the PowerPoint email to you for reference.